Clients are continually looking for new ways to try to bring down the overall cost of construction. It really just helps us get more housing built with fewer dollars. At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, right? It's not a problem with the technology with modular, it's an execution problem. There was no formal training in our industry of like how to do offsite construction. Most of us, are learning about it firsthand by doing it on the job. You have to respect that it's a process, it's not just a product. You really have to get into the details and pay attention. Any project using offsite construction should always have a schedule gain if it's well executed. You build that podium within 2 weeks, your building's up.
So reducing cost, increase profitability, maybe we'll see more market rate apartments going up. Housing is always, one of the top 3 topics that get discussed. One of the few things that we can agree on as a country is that we need more housing for people.
You can solve a lot of these things. You got to put the effort in.
Welcome everyone. My name is Wissam, the CEO and founder of Toughleaf, and this is Built Different. Today we're joined by Randall Thompson. The difference today is that we're in person in beautiful San Francisco, and Randall is at Nibbi Brothers. He's an executive in pre-construction. Randall, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. So Randall Thompson, pre-construction executive with Nibbi Prefab. We're a division within Nibbi Brothers General Contractors, a general contractor here in San Francisco. I've been in business for over 75 years, third generation family owned at that. So our division focuses solely on the delivery of multifamily projects using offsite or modular construction. So that's kind of where I spend most of my time these days.
Nice. So 75 years in business, and modular construction is it's been around for a minute now. I'll tell you, when I did my civil engineering undergrad, my final year project was on modular prefabricated housing. So it's been around for a while, but we haven't seen it be successful in a lot of places. So what did Nibbi do in order to make that work? And for a company that's been around for 75 years, adopting somewhat new technology that not everyone is using is a challenge. So what first, I guess, what made Nibbi make the decision of let's try this out?
Market demand to start with, and with the increased cost of construction here in the Bay Area, both labor and materials consistently going up. Clients are continually looking for new ways to try to bring down the overall cost of construction. And so, 5 years ago, let's say, the idea of a client leaning into the idea of an alternative construction method like modular was almost non-existent. There were few maybe kind of dipping their toe in it, whereas nowadays, most of our clients, if they haven't at least explored it, they've actually done at least one project using modular construction in the multifamily space. It's particularly attractive here for those developers because with the applications of prevailing wages and other requirements, we're able to move work off site and also work in a more, it's an ergonomically advanced environment. You have the efficiencies working with you, working in a factory setting really reduces the cost of the labor. That's what really benefits here in our market and why, offsite construction is so attractive. For us going into our first project, kind of seeing this on the horizon, we had done just a lot of homework. The first project just didn't kind of land on our lap and say, okay, great, let's go figure it out. We saw there was it was bubbling up in the market, right? And so we got out there, we got to know who the manufacturers are, spoke to our peers, learned from their experiences, really trying to find what the best practices were and what their pitfalls were so that we could learn from that and set ourselves up to be successful, which paid off with our first project. We were fortunate enough to have a client who was an existing client. They needed to reduce the cost of construction to make the job pencil. And they said, hey, we've kind of explored this. Are you guys open to it? And we said, yeah, we're ready. Let's check this out, right? And we knew exactly, where to go and who to talk to get that conversation going. And we, ended up with a successful project that met the client's financial goals and schedule and everything else. So it was a success on that front. That gave us the confidence to say, hey, we can execute this. We understand it well enough now to market it and actually bring it out to the rest of our clients. And we've continued to grow from there.
So it's more cost efficient, right? Because of labor. It's, I think, faster because a lot of the work is happening in the factory. There's still a lot of work happening on site, obviously, but a lot of work happening on factory. But what makes a project a good candidate for modular? Right? Can you do every project modular? Should you do every project as modular construction? Or, when do you decide like, okay, this is traditional, this should go to modular?
That's a great question. I mean, one of the first things we look at is site logistics. Modular construction requires a little more offsite space than most projects are used to accommodating. And when you're hoisting, the product, the modules themselves in, it requires a pretty significant size crane in most cases, right? So we need lay down space either directly adjacent to the site, if not on the property. We have to, if we have things like overhead power lines and things like that, those are almost non-starters. So we really have to study, can we actually physically build this using this methodology? That's check number one, right? And if the logistics are suitable, then it's, looking at with the design team, does the site layout, does the massing, allow you to get the most efficiency out of modular construction? There's a number of jobs where we look at where, yes, you could build this with offsite construction, but maybe for a number of just design constraints, you won't be able to maybe maximize the cost efficiencies for it. Maybe it's a little too chopped up. Maybe the geometry is just not quite ideal. So we look at that, just try to be honest with the client, say, hey, we really think this site's a good candidate. We think we're going to maximize efficiencies and get you the best possible cost versus, yes, we could do this, but you might not hit your goal at the end of the day, or maybe it's near a break-even cost. No matter what, any project using offsite construction should always have a schedule gain if it's well executed. To your point a moment ago, where that comes from is while you're building work on site, essentially you're building your foundations or getting to podium. Concurrent with that, the factory is building the rest of the structure in the building that's above that. So you have that overlap of work. So you go from, let's say for a 100-unit building, for example, on a podium, you build that podium within 2 weeks, your building's up. Now you've got a lot more work still left to do to finish the project off, but that's where your real schedule of savings happens. But you're not, say, done there. You still have to manage everything else on the back end to make sure you finish on time, work with your utility, providers that are coming in, make sure they know you have an advanced schedule. Otherwise, you could easily lose some of that on the back end. But schedule savings should always be an achievable goal no matter what.
Right. And now with, the big issue with housing shortage, schedule and getting housing fast is pretty important, I'm guessing, for a lot of clients, right?
It is smart. I mean, they'll have reduced costs on insurances, obviously on carrying costs with like the interest on their loans. It's valuable probably to some markets more so than others. Like market rate developments will probably favor more of that expedited delivery, where more of our affordable clients, the focus is really purely driven on trying to bring down the cost of construction. It helps them be more competitive with their pursuit of lining up financing on the project, but ultimately just helps us get more housing built with fewer dollars. At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, right?
Nice. And who's leading the charge? Is it, you folks at Nibbi and others going to the client and saying, hey, we know you want to build this. We think modular is going to be a better option. And here's the, schedule saving. Here's the cost saving. Or are they driving the conversation of like, hey, we want to do modular. Can you guys do it?
I mean, ideally, it comes from the client. That's the best case scenario because ultimately they're the ones who's leading the project, right? They're the ones who leading the concept. They kind of set the tone and the direction. So best case scenario is you have a client who's already comfortable and confident in it as a solution, and they communicate to their team and let the team evaluate it. But if it comes from the client, it's a much easier process. But it also can come from an architect who's already been seasoned in it, and they're looking at the job and they're saying, hey, have you considered this, right? We think the site could work. If they have the experience, they know how to lay it out. We'll look at it as a builder. I think almost any job that comes into our pre-construction department now, whether it's been flagged as being a potential modular project or not, we'll do a quick analysis and we think it's a good candidate and the team's not thinking about it. We'll at least make the introduction. We'll go to the client, the design team, and say, hey, have you guys thought about this? Are you open to exploring it? We think it's a good candidate. Again, in this market, we might be able to save you 10 to 15% on your hard costs. Is that something you're willing to explore? Ultimately, if they're not on board with it and they're not comfortable with it yet, we'll try to get them comfortable, but we can't force it as a means and methods. It requires the whole team to buy in, really, because everybody has a pretty significant role in making sure it's successful. So you want everybody to be bought in.
And are you seeing that happen more often now that people are, developers are more likely to be open to something like that?
Yep, most of them are, and a lot of the design firms I'm working with now have had experience with it, which is great. Owners, it's still a little bit of a mixed bag. There's been a number of projects out there who have set bad examples, right? That didn't go well on a number of fronts. And honestly, it's not a problem with the technology with modular, it's an execution problem, right? And it's an execution problem because we're all still learning how to do it, right? There was no formal training in our industry of like how to do offsite construction. Most of us, are learning about it firsthand by doing it on the job. So there's going to be some missteps along the way. The important part is people understand that and really instead of just saying, hey, this is a modular project that failed, or this is a modular project that had a huge builder's risk claim because of water intrusion, it's take the time to understand why. Like, why did that happen, right? Could it have been avoided? What would you do differently if you were in their shoes? And how can you take that knowledge forward now to your own projects? So a lot of time we're focused on education. We're educating our clients like, hey, here's what we're doing differently. Here's what we've learned. Here's how you can be successful with it. Same thing with our design partners and our sub-trade partners, right? Really trying to help everybody get comfortable. We want everybody to be successful, even our competitors. because we need more successes in the market to build confidence in the market, because it definitely can work, but everybody has to do their job. It requires the whole team to perform. It doesn't just rely on any one party. It's not just on the manufacturer, right? Everybody's got to do their job.
Interesting. And how does it change your job in pre-construction? Because, you've done pre-construction for traditional projects in the past, and now it's switched to modular, which is most of your focus today. How does it change your role?
So for us, it pulls a little more of the emphasis on things that we might otherwise do maybe at the onset of the start of construction that gets pulled back. Going back to the idea that during the first phases of construction, the factory is in production, right? Well, the factory has its own run-up period of activities that they need to do, processes that need to happen to set them up for success, right? So if you imagine if they're going to production pretty close to the start of the construction phase, they've got to be doing things like procurement, shop drawings, design coordination. Some of those things are activities that may traditionally maybe start at the beginning of traditional construction, but we've got to pull those workflows back now into the design process. So that's probably one of the key differences, is that we're doing some of those construction type activities during pre-con. So in terms of extra staffing and just process, maybe demand on the design team to be doing submittals and a little bit of CA during pre-con versus during construction. The other part is during the design process, we treat the manufacturer not only as a partner, but they're really like a design assist type role. Each one of them has something a little bit different that affects how they manufacture and what they can and can't do. And we have to have them on board during the design process to inform that as we go, particularly as it relates to structure and architecture. And so we got to bring them on early, just like you would in the design build phase, right? So we can get them engaged, and then it gives them their ramping up period too, for them to get their head into the project and their processes, like I said, with shop drawings and coordination. Same goes for any other design discipline. There's a lot, if it's a conventionally built project, there's a number of trades that still might be deferred as design build or delegated design. Again, things that might happen a little bit later in the process, closer to start of construction, that if any of those designs have any type of interface with the offsite construction, we need their designs earlier on, right? If they were going to require a point of interface, blocking within the framing, like we can't wait till later. We have to have that all figured out in front. So it forces the design team to basically assemble in full a little bit earlier than normal. So for the client, that's maybe a little more upfront soft cost to incur, but it's all part of, kind of part of the process. The other thing we're doing a little more advanced in the process is BIM modeling. Again, normally we might start to do it. If it's not a design build job, we might again start doing that till start of construction. We've got the time to bring the team together to do the models, do the clash detection, solve the problems, right, before we get too far into the project. Well, we have to do that in advance, because if there's anything that's going to affect the interface of the modular or the offsite work with the site work, we've got to flush that out before we start construction. So now we're doing that activity a little bit earlier. So again, you're pulling a lot of these processes back. You're doing just a lot more planning, a lot more coordination early on. But the trade-off to that now is you're getting more cost certainty going into closing on your loan. You got more certainty on how the project's going to go, because you flushed out a number of issues before you've maybe gotten a contract or before costs have been finalized. Those are all advantages, to the client, and ultimate a benefit to the project by having a little more certainty going in versus things that might have been deferred to, during the course of construction.
And for procurement on the GC side or the prime contractor side, does that mean that the owner needs to make a selection earlier than having like the drawings completely ready, like in a traditional design bid build, for example?
They do, yeah. In the case of the manufacturer, usually when you're bringing them on, it's about, call it design development, 50%, 100% phase, which is where you bring on most design build partners anyways. But that manufacturer does represent for most of our, call it give or take 100-unit apartment building, that factory cost is about 20-25% of the overall GMP, right? So it's not a small amount to say commit to in advance, but the manufacturers not necessarily truly locked into that, because you're kind of bringing on board, the design intent. They've given you pricing based on that, but the design's still evolving, right? So you kind of have some design contingencies to kind of absorb some of that, but you don't truly get them locked into their final production cost until you get through all that design and they have more clarity on what their actual scope is. So there's a little bit of, I wouldn't say exposure, but just there's a little bit of evolution in the design, right? So prudent project teams will carry a design contingency to cover that. But again, the positive side is now you have a pretty significant part of that client's budget that's more or less committed to now. A little less movement between there and when you get to contract, which just can be an advantage.
And are you seeing less change orders because of that?
We are. I mean, for some of our projects, we're seeing, because of the planning that goes on up front, because of the extensive coordination that happens with the factory, we're seeing a pretty significant reduction overall, like say RFIs that are happening in the field, which obviously then translates usually to dollars and scheduled sometimes, right? So there is the event. We're trying to get more data over time and across multiple projects to help kind of make that as a case so to speak, for one of the other benefits of like, there's an investment, right, that we're asking you to make, client, during pre-construction, during design, to make this successful. In addition to all the things we know about modular construction, here's what that means for the rest of your project too. You're mitigating that risk by doing that higher degree of coordination and, bringing the design to a higher level we might normally do. But again, you're more certainty on the back end, right? So it's less risk, less exposure for the client. But they just need to get more data. We need more projects under the belt, so to speak, to go back to and see what the trends are and be able to make a strong case for that.
And looks like we're on the right track right now, at least here in California. I mean, in New York, it hasn't gotten as big yet, but like a lot of things, maybe they'll learn from the West Coast and then start implementing them there. Well, very interesting. As we talk about trade partners, so what are you looking for in trade partners for these particular type of projects?
Yeah, ideally ones that have had experience before, because at least they kind of have a better understanding of the scope. But we also recognize that, like ourselves, have had only so many projects under our belt. And the same cases for others too, right? That they have not had experience, maybe limited experience. We recognize that learning curve translates into uncertainty, and therefore contingency money is usually going into the pricing. So we're reasonably confident we're not yet realizing the full savings on the hard cost side of things until the trades get a little more experience in the boat and have consistent experience, right? If a trade partner has a project that maybe doesn't go well or isn't well managed, and they walk away having lost money or broke even, that's going to factor into their cost history they're going to use to then estimate the next modular project, right? Or they might be a little more, they'll be a little more conservative with it, right? Or try to make up for that. And so again, we're trying to make consistent experiences, but also positive ones. I mean, one of the interesting things with a lot of the trade work that happens after the site gets done is the normal critical path flow for a typical, multifamily project, would usually involve more of the work inside the building being on critical path. Well, for a modular project, we go from foundations to setting modules to getting the building dried in, scaffolding down, and site work. So that means a lot of that work that happens inside the building, all of the MEP and some of the finish work that basically connects the modules to the site work, is really no longer critical path. So the idea of like, how do we create, if we know we'd have to go through there at a certain speed, right? Well, there's some back end to that, but realistically, we don't need to go through there at a breakneck pace. We're not on the critical path anymore. How do we create a workflow? How do you set up and sequence the trades and their crew sizes to go through those corridors now and work as efficiently as they can? So now we're not focused on scheduling, but we're focused on what we can do to make the trades more efficient so that they're more productive. They make more money. They can likely lower their cost. But again, we have to create enough experiences to prove that out and have consistency with it. But that's one of our areas of focus now. We also did a full-scale mock-up of a typical module corridor condition at one of our facilities here in the Bay Area. We use that as a training tool. We'll take the MEP trades out so they can physically see, like, hey, here's the conditions that you're going to receive. We've done it during bidding, which is helpful. Kind of gives them a better visual than what we can 2D see.
Kind of like a walkthrough, but
a little bit of an informal
interesting.
walkthrough, right? Every project's a little bit different, but it has kind of the typical conditions. So it's a way of just helping them understand this is what you can expect to receive. And then usually for the trades, once they've been selected for a job, we always have a trip where we go out to the modular factory so they can see the actual project. We always do a prototype. So they can go out there and physically see the actual project specific conditions in advance. So if there's any other questions to address or something they see that can be done different or better, they have a chance to weigh in on that before they receive it on site.
Very interesting. So speaking of trades, right? You're getting multiple funding sources, especially for affordable housing projects. Can you tell us a little bit about like what funding sources usually come for these types of affordable projects?
I mean, most often it's tax credits, both federal and state. It's probably one of the last pieces in most of our clients' funding stacks for affordable housing developers. But it comes from other sources too, locally. A lot of it tends to be local funds from housing authorities and whatnot. Of course, each one of those has its own series of requirements that come with it. Could be contractor requirements, local hire requirements, supporting minority women-owned businesses, for example, right? As a company, we're pretty well versed in that. We actually have a good track record of being a good steward of those requirements in all the jurisdictions we work in. But it does get challenging when you have multiple layers kind of at play, right? And trying to figure out how do they talk to each other and can we actually comply with all of them? Is there competing requirements in there? It's usually a challenge, but it is something that we give a lot of attention to during pre-construction. It informs our efforts of like, making sure we've got the right companies being invited to the bid list, but also informs our decisions, of course, too, when we're selecting the subs. Do we have a path to meet the criteria, right? Are we meeting all the goals through the qualified bidders and whatnot?
Interesting. So you're getting, because of the funding sources, the minority, women, small local business requirements from whether it's federal, state, local, and all of that fun stuff. And then you have the extra complication of like, okay, now we need to find, diverse small local businesses that are certified, but also have the experience in working with modular construction. So how are you dealing with that right now?
So the interesting part about that is it actually, I think it starts to create more opportunity for some of the smaller businesses sometimes because the scope's reduced. So if you have a company that may not otherwise have had the capability, the qualifications to go do, let's say, plumbing work on a 100 to 150 unit project, that would just be outside of their scale. Maybe it's beyond their bonding capacity or what they're capable of doing. But if you take a project that's now been built off site, same 100, 150 units, well, the amount of the scope that they have to do has been a little bit reduced, and obviously their dollar value of the contract's reduced, but that might put that within range now that they potentially can now compete on. So in some ways, it creates more work opportunity for some of the smaller businesses that are trying to, kind of compete with the big guys. Particularly it can be advantages if you have subcontractors who are really interested in figuring this out and open-minded. We've got a few of our partners who have come to us and said, "Hey, we really want to understand this. We see this coming up more. Can we do a sit down? Walk us through what's different for us. What do we need to be doing differently?" And we really appreciate that. We lean into that heavily. If someone says, "Hey, I want to learn more," we'll be that resource for them, or we'll guide them to resources if it's not something that or a trade that we're skilled in coaching them on. More often we are, but if it's not, let's help you out. Really appreciate you guys leaning into it. Those are the partners we want to have. The ones that truly want to figure it out versus saying, "Yeah, we've done it before. We'll give you a number for it." And maybe they, again, conservative numbers don't really help us at the end of the day. We really want trade partners who are leaning into it and generally want to understand and work with us to find solutions, right? There's always room for improvement. So we welcome people that want to get engaged and say, "Hey, I've got a way to do this," or "Could that work instead of this?" That we want people to engage ultimately.
That's very cool because like it seems like with modular, there's like a little bit of a vacuum right now in the market, right? Where there's all of the trade partners have been used to the traditional construction. Now, we're trying to get more people educated on modular construction, and that leaves more room for small, local, diverse businesses to come in. Those that are willing to learn, those that are willing to try it out, ask you folks and others in the industry for help. That kind of leaves more room for them, a less competitive space, but a place where they can actually make a decent profit and grow their business, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we found that the modular construction community as a whole is a pretty welcoming community. I mean, they all really want people to embrace it. It's viable for their continued growth and success. So I would be surprised if anyone from any stakeholder position that reached out to whether it's a manufacturer, design professional, builder, and says, "Hey, we want to learn more about this." I'd be shocked to find out if they reach out and someone to turn that request down. Like most people are willing to. I mean, that's how we got our start, with people who were willing to open up their doors and share their experiences with us, so we could get on our journey, and we've done the same in return. And I think there's a lot of practitioners out there that are like that. All it takes is someone just that wants to. And the ones I think that do it first are going to have the advantage. The ones that figure it out first and can do it well will have a competitive advantage against their peers.
That's interesting because there's camaraderie as if I'm like in modular kind of like how we have camaraderie in like construction tech. Like if I reach to other construction tech founders, people in the space, they're happy to teach and learn from each other, talk about the problems that we're facing. Seems like it's similar in modular. Why do you think that's that? Because it's not the same in traditional construction. It's way more cutthroat and competitive.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a little bit of protectionism in there with like IP, and people that feel that they've got something that's maybe their secret sauce, whatever it may be. But again, I think it's generally that they know they need to get more people capable of executing to continue to grow the industry. I mean, you're trying to grow the pie constantly, right? More people that can and want to build it, people that can build it. And I don't know, it's almost like a cultural thing that we learned when we first started to step into it. It was, "Oh, this is what this is like." So it kind of like sets the tone a little bit, right? When you're like a newcomer in the environment and you see how others are treating them, that kind of just it kind of perpetuates itself. It's just kind of an interesting thing, right? And so, but yeah, generally everybody wants each other to be successful. They want to help out because they need the industry to continue to grow and people to be confident in it.
That's cool, and it's a welcome change, I guess, in the industry.
Yeah,
That was nice.
it's very collaborative.
Which most of the industry kind of, some are collaborative, but there's a lot of people that are not. So like cutthroat competition, we don't want to share this, we don't want to tell you our secret sauce. So it seems like it's different here. What do you think, in terms of what makes a contractor successful going into modular, which Nibbi was, and others were, but others were not. What do you think makes like a difference between those that succeed and those who don't?
I think those that really one, just don't take it for granted. It's not as simple. You can't treat them like a traditional, say, subcontractor where you're saying, hey, here's a set of drawings, you give me a proposal to go manufacture, and I'll see you in a couple months, right? It's not like that. You have to, one, you have to respect that it's a process. It's not just a product. You have to approach it a little bit differently, and understand what is different about the process so you can set yourself up for success. It's heavy on the planning side. And it's getting to build your relationships with your manufacturers too, and really understand how they operate, what they can and can't do, and why. Right? Sometimes manufacturer might say, "No, I can't, or I'm not going to do that," and it's like, well, why? Right? Try to understand that because manufacturing is different. I think there's a lot that individuals might take for granted. Say, "Well, this is how we do it in construction." It's like, okay, great, but we're not really in that space right now. We're in this manufacturing of construction, and so I think respecting that a little bit, knowing that it is different, and understanding it. I think O's that maybe that we've seen that have had some troubles, maybe kind of took it for granted and just kind of said, okay, here's the purchase order, so to speak, and wait for the product to show up on site, and then be surprised it's not what you were expecting, or it doesn't perfectly line up with what you're going to do on site. A lot of those things probably could very well have been avoided with just more planning and attention to detail. There's, again, the industry is still figuring out how to execute this at its best possible way. It's going really well, but there's always still things we can get better at. And I think also just going in with that understanding of like, you really have to get into the details and pay attention, and you can solve a lot of these things. It just, you got to put the effort in.
Interesting, because that might be driving why the industry is more collaborative, because you kind of have to, right? If you're not collaborative with your subs, with your trade partners, with the owner, with the manufacturer, it's not going to be successful from what I'm understanding, right?
Right. And with your design teams, I mean, there's some, it's kind of this gray area where over quite some time now, the idea of means and methods have really moved entirely away from a responsibility of the design professional onto the build team, right? Which was some pros and cons to that. But now you're taking something that's, is it means and methods? Yes, but at the same time, it's completely inherent to the direction that the design's going in. So it's kind of starts to kind of move towards the middle now. And again, something the industry is trying to figure out is who's responsible for communicating some of the details that go with this, right? Is it the design team? Is it the manufacturer? Is it the builder to work out with the subs? There's still this space that we're trying to tidy up a little bit and trying to figure out what's the best standard for the industry. It cleans up some of the ambiguity of things. I think it solves some of the problems that people might have as terms of trip ups or missed expectations about what happens on site versus factory. But again, it's one of these things is if you're communicating, getting into the details with the team as a whole, you're going to figure it out. And whether it's the role of the manufacturer to clarify something or the builder or the architect, the team needs to sort that out. That's the thing that I think that's kind of fluid right now. There's no industry standard yet that's consistent. So, but it is one of those areas where, how well those conversations happen can really have a big impact on how things go on site. We've seen it both ways. We've had our own lessons learned there about, okay, next time we need to be very clear or get into the details on these items because someone else isn't necessarily doing this. We need to make sure the team does, and it sets us up for, better success on site.
That reminds me a lot of like when design build was like getting started, and then DBIA came in and kind of set like the industry standards of like, here's what like a typical design build agreement looks like. Here's, all the industry standards for design builders and how things should be divided. In their opinion, not everyone follows it to the T, but at least there's some sort of industry standard. Do you think there's room for that if it doesn't exist today in modular construction?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it'll get there too. It's just a matter of, getting consensus on what that is. In this case, you had DBI that kind of became this entity that came together and kind of set at least a baseline. Like you said, maybe not everybody follows it to a T, but it helps a standard that most people are familiar with, and maybe people adapt it as needed for their unique needs, but it at least gives you a baseline to work from. And right now, I think there's a need for that baseline, and it can come from a number of different angles. And I know there's, people that are in their own way working to establish what that is, or peer groups that are coming together to try to figure this out. So there's definitely interest amongst the community to develop it. It's just a matter of, where it lands, I guess. Who wants to pick up the flag and own it?
Yeah. Who wants to be the person responsible for doing that?
Yeah. Who has the authority?
Yeah, was the authority, and like if it works, hey, great job. And then have someone to blame if it doesn't work out,
It
right?
doesn't have to be a one size fits all. Just again, think about people that are coming into it new. It'd be great to have a resource. Say, hey, here's a set of best practice. Here's a starting point of something that is, a lot of people have bought into or believe is a good approach. Start with that, tailor it to fit your needs, right? But right now, there's no single document that maybe exists like that yet. So it's just kind of like as an industry, as it evolves, I think that'll come together.
Interesting. And what's the hardest lesson or the most expensive lesson a contractor can learn in modular construction?
Water intrusion.
Oh yeah.
Yes, hands down. There's been, again, it's one of those kind of experiences that have happened here, and particularly in the Bay Area a few years back. There's a couple of some of the earliest, they call it publicly visible modular projects here in the Bay that were unfortunate to be under construction during a pretty wet winter. And during that phase, they unfortunately took on quite a bit of water. It led to some pretty significant claims. So that scarred a lot of people, unfortunately, in terms of their comfort level and the risk perception of offsite construction. And so, again, it was one of those things we learned early on and knew that we'd have to have a good plan in place. Our very first project that we did, unfortunately, ended up having setting modules into the fall and then doing the dry-in through the winter. We deployed a pretty expensive solution, but it ultimately worked at the end of the day with like tenting the building. But it kept the building dry and served its purpose, avoided any like insurance type claims, right? But after that, we said, okay, we need to find out, a better practice, engineered solution, something going forward. So it's one of those things where, if well managed, there's good practices that are out there that can keep the building dry, or decisions that maybe need to get made to maybe, slow down production a little bit on site, maybe wait to finish off the roof till you got a clear spell or get out of the winter. There's some trade-offs sometimes, right? But it's still less expensive than having a significant insurance claim. The thing about it, the modules themselves are finished from the inside out. They're protected temporarily during transit and storage, but as soon as you set them on site, that protection situation changes a little bit. And there's different exposures at different stages. And from our perspective, one of the biggest exposures is when you're done setting and you're doing all the permanent construction on the roof, you start to peel that roof, that protective membrane that's temporary, back to do the permanent work. You're incrementally exposing your building. And so, for now, we've developed a bit of a temp to perm solution with one of our roofing manufacturers as a means of addressing that as a solution. And we actually tested it out on one of our projects that set through this last winter. Modules got set right before Thanksgiving. We got dried in by Christmas time. We had at least one atmospheric river that came through and the building was dry. So huge success there. But it's like, again, it's coming up with new solutions, new problems, right? The design doesn't take into account the fact that you got this box that's going to be exposed. It's a means and methods onto the build team and the setting company to figure, okay, how are we going to protect the modules? What's our risk profile here? What are we going to do about it? It's about having a plan. And hopefully we continue to be successful with that, because no one wants to have one of those claims. It's nothing worse than going in and tearing a bunch of stuff out that was done and rebuilding it. So it's probably one of the biggest lessons that someone could take on. It's just understanding that and have a plan for it, right? There's a solution. It's risk like anything else. You got to come up with means to mitigate it.
Yeah, and pushes the industry back. If you're like, again, to your point, if there's a couple projects that don't work out, the clients are gonna be scared. The developers are like, well, I don't want to risk losing money. I'd rather pay an extra 10-15% and deal with what I know rather than deal with what I don't know. And that's, again, where like sharing, collaboration, and talking about these failures in a sense of like, okay, well, we failed here. How are we going to improve next time so we don't fail again? As opposed to like throwing modular out of the window because guess what, we had a bad project.
Yeah, I mean, all it takes is probably one for a client to have an experience like that. That'd be, like I said, be enough of a turnoff. It might take a while for them to come back around to it, and we've seen that happen, unfortunately. But like I said, there's the clients are paying more attention to that. It's when it comes up in conversation more often than not. If we're pursuing a project, they'll ask, hey, what is your plan? How do you manage weather mitigation? And we appreciate them asking the question. It means they're recognizing it. And hopefully, through the process, hearing at least our feedback about how we approach it, our hope is that we give them confidence that there's a way to do it and we're capable of that. So we can build, again, their confidence in the method and not let that be a deterrent for them.
A lot of parallels with construction technology, right? Because we see the same stuff on our end, right? Like if a client buys a software or a product that doesn't work, then that kind of pushes the entire industry back. It's like, oh, well, we've bought from so-and-so and we subscribe to so-and-so product and now, they don't do what we expected.
Yeah, so we're going to go back to the old way.
Exactly. So it's a lot of parallels there on collaboration, on risk, because anytime you're trying to change habits, I think, or especially in construction, because people are set in their old ways, there's a challenge you need to overcome. You need to figure out change management and how to convince them that the new way is better.
Absolutely.
So speaking of technology, where do you think technology can be most helpful in modular and in the space that you're in?
I mean, there's a lot of opportunities, I would say. I mean, one is, we're more and more leveraging, VDC and BIM as a way of kind of pre-planning or doing digital twins of our project, right? It's a tool to help kind of build the building digitally, solve the problems while it's a lot less expensive. You have more time to do it before you actually go and manufacture, right? So we're seeing the industry lean into being a higher degree of development with design, right? We're taking it further than we would do in the past when you're using offsite construction. I think there's going to be a heightened attention to data capture, right? Having information that we have the capability of now recording and doing it mindfully, and then using that to inform, decisions and trends and stuff as we move forward on what's going on, and actually having a means to make the case for we're going to invest more time on this item or an advancement here because you've got the data now to back it up. Whether it's labor productivity in the field, it's trends with RFIs and change orders, like all of that stuff is things that we probably have in files from decades on and maybe still sitting there even in a digital format that people are now realizing, hey, if we look backwards at that, we have a very uh, easy means through like AI technology and whatnot to go and quickly analyze a lot of that information and then use it now to make decisions on how we move forward. I mean, it is interesting. We're here in San Francisco. It's kind of the birthing place, so to speak, of a lot of this technology, which is great. So there's a lot coming at the industry right now. I think the biggest challenge is companies like ourselves learning how to evaluate these different opportunities that are coming out. What are our needs? What are the solutions that we would like to solve? And then going out and finding the technology partners, the platforms out there that can do just that. And it's exciting in that sense because I think it's going to allow us to do, again, a lot more than what we've been doing in the past, be more accurate, be more productive. So in that sense, it's an exciting time.
That's very, very interesting because, like now, if we were talking 5 years ago, a lot of this people would not even be thinking about, right? Like, how do we use AI to go back through our data and figure out how to go and move things into the future? So I love that, like, the discussion has been changing around our industry and around these topics of like, we want to use lessons learned in the past and use that to improve the future, right? I was on Second Avenue subway. I spent like 5 years there, and then when the job is done, everything was filed in, and
Bankers boxes in a warehouse.
that's it. And then no one saw that, right? And now they're doing Second Avenue Phase 2. I asked the question to some of my friends designing, and I'm like, "Did you look at that stuff?" And no, no one even looked at it. So
But now with everything being stored digitally on whatever, project management platform you're using or whatnot, right? Where you can look backwards now and look at trends, create. I mean, I did something the other day just as a quick exercise and say, hey, I want to create a checklist based on lessons learned of things that we want to look for a given topic. And it went and pulled all of our data on the topic of lessons learned from past projects and pulled a checklist for it. It took seconds. It needs to be back checked, of course, right? But the ability to actually harness and like actually go back and scrape that information that quickly and effectively, that really changes our ability to just, like I said, just get better.
yeah, someone still needs to look at it, but it takes you 90% of the way there, right?
Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit to workforce, right? Because when we're doing modular, there's less need of workforce on site, right? And I know Nibbi is a union company, right? Have you had any pushback on like you're using less workforce, you're taking away jobs? I don't think you are because like there's jobs in the factory, right? But have you had that? Have you felt that? Has there been like any pushback from the community?
There's definitely a little bit of sensitivity there because, yes, we are taking work not only off the job site, but sometimes even out of our community, right? And it's done as a means to help get housing. So it's kind of it's like you're solving one problem, maybe creating another one. But at the end of the day, we're trying to get housing built, which is, no one will doubt is a pressing challenge. But yeah, there is work that's being moved off site. I think in the interim, it's different per trade. I mean, some trades like, we're signatory to carpenters, for example, right? And that's probably one of the trades that's most impacted when we're moving the framing of a, 3, 4, 5-story wood frame building to an offsite facility that's not us. That's a lot of labor hours that are being given away to another entity, right? But then maybe for some other trades like plumbing and mechanical, electrical, for example, their percentage reduction might be a little bit less than what it might be perceived. But I think the trade-off over time, as the industry continues to evolve and manufacturers continue to come online, one, there's going to be new opportunities for new jobs. They're going to pop up in the factory setting, right? There's going to be, I think there's a world or a place where those modular manufacturers may rely on companies that are going to make sub-assemblies, just much like an automaker works, right? That could be business models for our subcontractor, our trade partners now, where they pivot to part of their business models, not just doing traditional work on site. It could be making sub-assemblies for the local modular manufacturer. That marketplace doesn't exist now, but I don't think it's too far off. It's just more of like thinking like what direction is the market going in and how is that going to change what we do today? How would it be different, right?
And then they don't need insurance. They don't need as big of a, they don't need the bonding. It's a
It's a different model, right? But they'll be doing, I mean, we have trade partners now that do sub-assemblies and pre-kitting, right? Is it on their own? They just say, hey, we're going to do this because we found a way to be more cost-effective with our time. We can sit in a shop, make all these up, send them out in kits. They go to a job site, the crews install it in the factory. So some do that now. They do it for themselves mostly. But again, I think just the opportunities will shift a little bit. And then, of course, there's the work and the opportunities being created in the factories. It's opening up the marketplace to employees that may not have been, for a number of reasons, maybe not comfortable, maybe not capable working on a construction site for a number of reasons. You're seeing a very diverse workforce in the factory compared to what you might see in a job site. So it's creating
It's safer, right?
is safer, it's ergonomic, it's indoors. If someone has any type of physical limitations, there's still more opportunities that they can do there because it's very ergonomically friendly environment most of the time. And there's technical skills with running pieces of equipment and different tasks that are happening, again, that are a little bit different than traditional construction, but it is creating new opportunities that haven't exist. So there's going to be a little bit of adoption that's going to happen over the next several years. Why that, everybody continues to kind of accept this as it continues to grow. But again, it's creating new work opportunities for some. I think there's future business models that maybe haven't quite fully been grasped yet that'll get picked up, hopefully. But yeah, it is a little bit of pushback. But I think the staying power is a little bit different this time, and we're seeing the trades, particularly on the union side, are beginning to embrace this as a construction method. They understand it. Most of them had experience with it at this point. It takes a little bit of time, but I'm confident that we'll still get there, and everybody will still have plenty of work to do.
That's cool because, like, I think, and one of the ways that you can kind of get community buy-in is through working with small local businesses that are in the community to be like, listen, you guys still have the opportunity to get here. And as you were mentioning earlier today, is like, okay, now with a slightly reduced plumbing package or mechanical package or whatever it might be, now you have an opportunity that you didn't have in the past.
Correct. And we'll see more manufacturers, I think, come online in the state. There's a number of them now that are online and have been producing product for a while. I think as the market grows for this, there's legislation kind of coming up here within the state that's going to help, I think, remove some of the barriers and obstructions that we deal with now to make it a little bit easier to get modular projects to come together and get executed. That I think if the demand continues to grow, we get more confidence in those, either that want to expand their existing established facilities or those that want to create a new factory because they see the opportunity there and have their own approach to it. So again, it's going to take time, but there's some really good momentum right now. I think the next 5 to 10 years will look different than it does now.
So affordable housing is always, one of the top 3 topics that get discussed, and it's supported by both sides of the aisle. Like, one of the few things that we can agree on as a country is that we need more housing for people. And it seems like this is a very practical solution. It's cheaper, it's faster, and it creates opportunities for factory jobs, which a lot of people have also been trying to push as more stable jobs, like things that are more long term. What do you think would hold us back from being able to actually, get modular into supercharge?
I mean, I think education's a big part of it, just getting more people skilled in how to execute it and do it well. I think the marketplace kind of continuing to grow a little bit more. I think, you mentioned it, being more focused on affordable housing. I think right now it is because that's kind of what pencils right now. And based on a number of factors, the interest rates, not the least of which is impacting that. But, we have other markets that have done and are interested in using offsite construction. I mean, hospitality's been using it and continues to use it as a solution strategically. Market rate developers are also taking interest in it. Although the conditions are still challenging, even with potential schedule savings. But it's not just an affordable solution. I think it's a solution for all types of housing, student dormitories, etc. Right. But I think really for it to kind of scale and take off, project teams have to just think a little bit differently. I mean, one of the challenges we have now is that every project that goes through a factory is bespoke. So if you're a manufacturer, let's say comparing it to say the automotive industry, they've got models, they've got automotive models. They might have different features and colors and everything else that goes down the line, and you can buy one off the lot that's already prepackaged. Some manufacturers you can go and order your car. But I think to get to a place to really leverage the benefits of manufacturing and continue to bring down the cost and increase efficiencies is, the industry as a whole has to get to a place where there's a little more consistency between product. Right now, most manufacturers, will build within reason, not whatever design, but every project's a little bit different. No one sees the same product come through. No one's okay, here's my catalog, pick this studio and those 2 bedrooms and go build a project. That doesn't quite exist, but it's not far off yet. But if we get to that place where factories can have a more consistent pipeline of consistent product coming through, with that repetition, they will only get more productive and more efficient at what they're doing. And with consistency, that will help bring down cost. But if you also creates opportunity for project teams, designers to say, okay, we've got something that's somewhat of a standard now that we're going to use for this project because we know it's the most cost-effective option we can put in there. And they start designing around those catalog parts, right? Versus designing every project unique from scratch. Some are doing it, some are kind of slightly leaning into it, but I wouldn't say it's common practice at all yet. But I think if we get to that place over time here, probably not too long, we'll start to see more mainstream adoption. It'll be more effective for the factories, more consistent pipeline.
And one of the biggest issues with market rate developments today is that it's not as profitable as it used to be, right? So reducing cost, increased profitability, maybe we'll see more market rate apartments going up, right?
Yeah, they particularly are interested in the schedule savings. That they're more tuned in to the benefits of turning over a project 25% faster than if you built it conventionally. That's you could almost potentially have a project that's like a near cost parity with conventional construction, but if you could shave months off the back end, that would be more attractive enough.
Especially with high interest rates, right? Because now you can get your money back early.
Start generating revenue faster, all the things, right?
Very, very cool. Last question I'll ask, and then if you have anything that you'd like to add. But do you think there's room for finding more subcontractors that can do this work? Right? What are techniques that you're using right now to find trade partners? And do you think there's room for using technology, something like Tough Leaf, to find more trade partners?
No, absolutely. I mean, the market right now, we're fortunate enough we're getting pretty good bid coverage and interest in most projects because the other sectors aren't quite as busy, so they're leading into the ones that are, like housing. The method to get them in there really is just to, we do a lot of outreach, right? We're looking at trades that are coming in that are bidding. One of the first questions we're asking is, hey, have you done this before, right? Is this your first project of this nature? How confident do you feel in understanding of the scope? And we take more time to really make sure that they understand the scope. I mean, if the drawings are missing some information we think is important, we try to make that up with supplemental bid documents to help explain exactly what their role is, where that interface is between their work and the factory. Because we want them to understand, we want them to be successful. We don't want to bring in a sub who is arbitrarily low because they didn't understand the scope. It's not a win for anybody at the end of the day. So we really want them to have a good understanding. So we do try really hard to communicate that through that process. But we do need more partners that are skilled in, like as I mentioned earlier, those that really want to lean in and say, hey, I really want to understand how to do this and compete at it. What do I need to know? And how do we create the opportunities for them to learn from that? And hopefully with enough experience, they'll come up with their own innovative solutions. I mean, one of the benefits of the offsite construction is you tend to get more consistent work product. As a trade is going down the corridor, they should have more consistency of how they're interfacing. So you're an MEP sub, the condition that you're receiving and tying into on every single module should be generally consistent, right? Especially if it's the same type of unit from one to the other. Where they may say, hey, I could actually, if you could, make these few tweaks here, I could actually do my own pre-assembly. I could find ways to even be more efficient. And, it's a competitive advantage for them. It brings down the cost of construction for us. So it's like looking for those opportunities for those subs that think that way, that see the opportunity here, that want to kind of innovate and find ways to take advantage of the fact that instead of looking at say, hey, I've lost some hours here because some of this work's being done in the factory. It's like, hey, the conditions are actually a little bit different. I could actually do things that I can't do on a conventional job because I have more certainty of the work product I'm going to be interfacing with.
So communication, education, and innovation are like the top three things that trade partners can come, thinking about in order to be successful there. And it seems like, the world is their oyster. If they're willing to do that stuff, there's a lot of work to be won.
Absolutely.
So that's great. Well, thank you so much. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. And the messages get out there and do your homework, ask around. It's good. The community's good about sharing their experience and their knowledge, and we'll welcome anybody in who wants to embrace it. So,
and if someone wants to, learn more, find more about, how to get into modular construction, how do they reach you?
Obviously through our company's website. Is one through Nibbi Brothers. The Modular Building Institute is, a big voice for this industry. They're they're actually an international organization, but they represent here in the United States. They've got a wealth of educational information, training information as well to represent the industry. And there's probably more training coming up for those that are looking to be, for the working professional, so to speak, training opportunities for all layers of the workforce.
Well, Randall, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And have a great rest of your day. Thanks everyone for listening in, and more to come.